أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining us this afternoon on this blessed day of the 28th day of Ramadan, or perhaps it's the 29th night, depending upon where you are. It is Mental Health Awareness Week, and today's webinar is all about maintaining relationships and mental health. Of course, a very important topic, even more so with the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Mahera Ruby here with us today. And let me give you some details about Dr. Mahera Ruby, inshallah. Dr. Mahera Ruby is a personal development, parenting and youth coach. She set up Blooming Parenting in 2012 with a vision to reshape and strengthen families and communities through facilitating bespoke parenting courses. Dr. Mahera has been a teaching fellow at the University College London, which is the Institute of Education. She completed her PhD at Goldsmiths, the University of London, in the Department of Education in 2015. Dr. Mahera has authored many publications. She has co-authored her first book, Interconnecting Worlds, Teacher Partnerships for Bilingual Learners, and her latest book, Family Jigsaws, Grandmothers as the Missing Piece Shaping Bilingual Children's Learning Identities, has been published by the Institute of Education Press. Dr. Mahera is a community organizer. She was the chair of Muslimat UK and is currently a director and trustee at the Markfield Institute of Higher Education and trustee of East London Mosque. Dr. Mahera is involved in many interfaith projects and activities. She is an executive member of the Tower Hamlets Citizens. MashaAllah, clearly a very busy woman, MashaAllah. Just thank you so much to her for giving up her time to be with us this afternoon, inshallah. Just in case you've joined these webinars for the first time, this webinar will include a presentation by Dr. Mahera Ruby, followed by questions from the virtual floor, which is yourselves. During Q&A, you can raise your hand. So there's a button where you can raise your hands, or you can write the word speak in the chat box. So speak, S-P-E-A-K, in the chat box. And inshallah, we will then try our best to answer any questions that you may have, inshallah. We are going to aim to end at 5 o'clock. We have been quite successful in ending on time, mashallah. And I know there's many other things that you have planned for this evening, inshallah. Okay, so without further ado, let's go straight over to Dr. Mahera Ruby. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum. Are you able to see my screen?
Yep, we can see your screen.
Good, brilliant, okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي زدني علما ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير. Assalamu alaikum, and I just want to thank Nida Trust for inviting me to this wonderful platform. I've managed to join a couple and I found them extremely informative and rewarding, to say the least, alhamdulillah. So my session today will be focusing on maintaining relationships and mental health. And as part of Mental Health Week, it's apt that we do discuss this. I don't think it's a new topic for many of us who have joined today. And often I find, those who join sessions like these are on our journey already to understand things better, and also are involved in certain strands in society where we have a circle of influence. So alhamdulillah, I hope the session will be of benefit. And what I have to say, there's a disclosure, I'm not a clinically trained counselor. What I am is a coach. So what I'm going to share with you is my experience of dealing with families, young people across the age, from young children to teenagers to university students, but also at the other end when people are entering marriages, in their marriage, but also as they turn into parents, they go on the journey of becoming parents. So there's a whole range of things and issues that I have come across, but more importantly, there is a common thread that goes through all of these age groups, and we see certain symptoms manifest during certain stages of our lives, and often we may not register that they are symptoms that we need to be particularly concerned about. We just put it down to growing up and experiences and being able to deal with certain situations, but also in our personal experiences. A lot of this, I think some of what I say will resonate with us as individuals on our journey through life as well, and where we are at the moment. So what I wanted to do was very quickly ask you to share on the chat, if the facility is available, sort of what's your understanding of illness? How do you view illness?
So I've
You can just
enabled
use the
chat,
chat,
so
sorry.
everyone can share their thoughts
Yeah.
via the chat. Yeah.
So in your view, how do you, opposite to Afia, okay. Anything else? So when I say the word illness, what does it bring up for you in your mind? A state where our daily functions are affected, not feeling well. What does that look like when we're not feeling well? So loneliness, a state of not being well, physical, it can be physical, mental, not being in the correct frame of mind, not fully functioning, pain in body, so it's very physical as well. A few more and then I'll ask you the next question. Illness is a state when our bodies cannot perform effectively. We're tired, we're burdened, it's testing, not yourself and unable to do what you normally, be it physically or mentally. So being your normal self, discomfort. Now, if I was to ask you what you understand by resilience, so if I was to ask you, what does being well, what does it mean? So if I'm well, it often sort of denotes that I'm feeling well and I'm feeling able. So again, if I say, okay, happy, yeah. So we're on to thriving, being able to deal with different situations, being able to use strategies to stay well, back to normal. So that's really interesting. So what is individual normality as well? Sense of satisfaction to achieve. Being well is a being at peace. That's also really interesting. So when we are well, we're at peace, and when we are ill, we are in discontent, I guess, in not in tune with our normal self, which should be well. Yeah. So happy, balanced, having a sense of control, clear-headed. Great. This is really helpful. So keep them coming. But I will move on to the next slide. So here I have a slide that is off the web, and it shows the different symptoms we can come across when we think about mental health. Now, in this presentation, I'm pretty much aware that we all are generally aware about the statistics of mental health, that 1 in 4 adults suffer from mental health at least a period in their life, at least once in their life. But also young children, some say that it's between 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 7. So the percentage is quite high. So we are aware of these issues, but also women tend to express it better than men. More women are diagnosed than men because men find it more difficult to express mental health issues. So again, there's all these things out there, but today I really wanted to focus on the aspect of relationships and where does it fit in with mental health. So if you look at this diagram of figure of this individual and what mental health could look like, there are a series of labels that we can use, and I'm not saying that labels are a bad thing, but just there's mental disorder, there's anxiety, there's schizophrenia, there's PTSD, bipolar, ADHD, OCD, so many different things, and labels and explanations of what these labels are and symptoms of what builds up to be these labels that we can be diagnosed with that can indicate that we have mental health. Now, in the chat, we've had suggestions that it debilitates us from our normal activities. So we may not be able to carry on with normal life, but actually we can meet people that are high functioning, that have that you wouldn't even know they have mental health issues. So something, for instance, like OCD, only until it becomes very, very serious do we realize that it's an issue. But generally, this idea that we can be clean, I just want cleanliness, and we can use faith to say that cleanliness is a half of faith. We like to repeat wudu, we like to clean our houses. It's not a problem in itself, changing so many times in the day. Now, we only notice that if it's to the extreme where it stops people from functioning in society. But so I've come across people who are high functioning, and I didn't know that they have low level or a sort of a general level of anxiety and depression in their life. So again, it's very difficult to know. So these blue arrows I have, what I wanted to ask you to think about is actually what causes these disorders as we see them. What causes us to go down this path of what is seen as normality and illness being below that? So we're going downwards when we have certain symptoms. So it's a downward spiral when we are ill. What causes us to have these symptoms? What causes us to have bipolar? What causes us to? Part of it is biological, part of it is hereditary, but actually a lot of it is based on relationships, based on how we are viewed, but also how our personalities are dictated by society. So just to give an example, I have very recently, in the last couple of days, I've had a call from a young lady who's in her first year of marriage, and she's very anxious. She doesn't feel that she's in a healthy marriage because her husband is saying things. He becomes volatile, and she ended by saying that she thinks that he has some narcissistic characteristics. As we started talking, whenever she describes her husband, she would describe him to be very able, very articulate, very competent. He knows what he's doing. He's very established. He knows how to talk to people. And whenever she talked about herself, it was more subdued. That I'm very emotional. I react from emotion. I'm not very objective when it comes to things, complications and complex situations in our marriage. And I tend to react from a place of aggression or wanting to be heard. And when I asked her, so who were you like this before? And she said, no, I'm quite a confident person. I'm normally a confident person, but I feel as if my confidence is slowly deteriorating. And then I asked her, so where have you started to generate this idea about yourself that you're not competent, that you're not eloquent, that you're not able to have a voice? And it took a while before she realized that actually it's the way he presents me to me that I've started to develop this idea about myself. So again, it's based on a relationship. So we have these relationships where we are shaped by them in how we view ourselves, but also our worldview of others and the situations that we're in. So again, highlighting the importance of relationships. So if we look at resilience, and we look at emotional well-being, which is normally put side by side, used interchangeably, we come across all these words. So they're balanced, as some of you have put on the chat. There's humility, there's sense of the self, there's a sense of calm. Normally we are confident when we're resilient, we're grateful, we are able to handle change. There's a certain amount of self-awareness, good communication, empathy, motivation. So these lovely aspirational words are used to describe resilience. But actually, I have a question for you all that are on the session today. How do you view vulnerability against resilience? How do they fit into each other in some way, or are they mutually exclusive? And what are we normally working towards? So I'll answer the last question, because I can envisage that we'll all have something similar, which is we are all working towards being the resilient self, the able, confident self. But actually, how do you see vulnerability and resilience? Where do they fit into each other? How do they fit into each other? Do they fit into each other even? I'd love to hear your read your responses rather. So can I make the picture bigger? I think this is as big as it'll get. Okay, so somebody's saying that depends on the context or situation. Expand on that a bit. So what would vulnerability and resilience look like in a complex situation? Because when the times are good, resilience isn't a problem. We're able to get on. It's only in times of difficulty that we have this question around, am I vulnerable or am I resilient? The greater one's resilience, the lower their vulnerability, okay? Knowing how to see things from a different perspective. So resilience is being able to see things from a different perspective. Vulnerable is the opposite of resilience. Okay, so this is really good. So we have this idea that vulnerability is something we want to avoid, because in society there's a notion that if you're vulnerable, you can be taken advantage of. You can be taken advantage of. You can be, your sense of goodwill can be misused. Your generosity can be again, it's all the negativity around the vulnerability. But actually, just the case study that I mentioned earlier, I use the idea of a cake. Sorry, we're all fasting, but I'm sure we'll all be able to handle the example of a cake. So those of us who bake, if you can imagine, you put a mixture into the oven. You put your mixture into the oven, and as far as I know, you're supposed to wait 20 minutes before you can even check if it's getting anywhere, because if you open it before, you'll let the air in, and it can impact on the way the cake proceeds in how well it bakes. So these 20 minutes you wait, and then you open the oven, and we consistently try to poke to see if it's cooked, right? But there are times when I myself, I've opened the oven and I've seen that the outer layer is a nice brown, just the brown that I want, to show that this is a good cake, it's been baked well. But then my heart drops, and the feeling comes of sadness when I see the middle bit, which is still soft, right? I can see, if I shake the tray a bit, I can see the middle bit jerking around. And then I think, oh no, by the time that cooks, the outer surface will become burnt, right? It will be a darker brown that I really don't want on my cake. Now, actually, vulnerability and resilience is kind of similar to this example, that we try to create this exterior of resilience when we're really not healing our inner self, right? So when we try to create this exterior resilience of what we think society expects of us, don't cry, or they will say that, I've heard people say to people who have lost a loved one, have faith in Allah, be strong, don't cry. That shows that you haven't accepted Allah's will, right? Let's, make dhikr, make dua for the deceased. And you've kind of encouraged that person to not grieve. And part of the grief is to be able to cry, is to be able to, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so merciful, He allows us that space to cry. So then what happens is you create this hard exterior, but our inside is still wobbly, because the pain and the hurt is still inside, but we don't know how to express it on the outside, because it might not be socially acceptable. So if I've lost a loved one and I start to grieve 6 months later, it might be a shock to certain people. Why am I doing that 6 months later? But maybe the way I've processed things, it's where I'm ready now to heal and to be able to express my inner sort of vulnerability. So this idea about where vulnerability and resilience sits, I really want to encourage brothers and sisters who have joined today to really shift our mindset that actually, Islamically, they're just as valuable as each other. One cannot exist without the other. If you want to be truly resilient, it means actually truly to be resilient, it means you've dealt with the vulnerabilities in a positive way, that they've become a part of your resilient self. Yeah. And in the coaching that I'm involved in, I often find that I have this outer lovely brown layer of the cake, but what I'm having to do is go back and deal with that soft core that hasn't been dealt with before, because I come from a family possibly where everybody got on with it. And I was told, or I was the eldest, or I was the middle child, or I was the youngest child. And we find lots of reasons to rationalize why we feel the way we do. But actually, it's been dictated to us as a social, in a way, it's a social construct. In education, we come across a lot of things that being constructs of things. So we use scaffolding as an example in teaching, where we, the teachers, are there to scaffold our children to reach a level where they can now cope by themselves, and let them do that, and then go on to the next thing that they're struggling with, and we scaffold that. And I have in my thesis, I actually challenged that notion that actually it's a synergy that happens. It's not a scaffolding. The teacher is just as vulnerable as the child. It just looks different between the teacher and the child, right? So when we have the teacher, she also has, or he also has, a life that they've come to teaching for. So the classic example of a question we're asked when we go for our PGC interviews, why do you want to become a teacher? Or our first job interview, whatever job interview we go to, we're asked, why do we want that job? And a part of us is because we want to change the lives of children. We want to change the lives of family so that they can be this confident, aspiring young individual that can reach their full potential. But actually, the time that we have our children, but even in our own lives, have we really dealt with some of our issues before we've come into the classroom, or while we're in the classroom? How self-aware are we? Which leads me to the next slide. This is something I've taken off from somebody's Facebook post, and I thought there's a lot of comments or quotes like what you see on the right, but I've chosen 2 or 3 here. And I hope you can, I identify with some of them. So here it says, they punish me as a child and I'm fine. So the man who every time he makes a mistake says to himself words of contempt as a form of self-punishment. The second one says that my parents told me they were going to leave me alone or give me to a stranger when I did my tantrums, and I do not have traumas. Said the woman who has prayed for love and has forgiven repeated infidelities so as to not to feel abandoned. The third one is my parents controlled me with just a look, and see how well I came out, said the woman who cannot maintain eye contact with figures of authority without feeling intimidated. Now, if you think about emotional resilience and emotional well-being, majority of us were probably raised with this look, and I wonder why my children doesn't understand my look. You know, they question, are you okay, mom? Have you got a squint? Is your eyes hurting? But when we were growing up, we knew that look from our parents. But actually, has it done something to how we view authority, how we see things? So I always think that we come to a stage in our life where we're able to forgive our parents because we feel that they didn't know any better. But that forgiveness doesn't actually mean that the pain inside me has also left, right? The neglect I felt, or the sense of not being worthy that I felt, it doesn't mean that they've gone with the forgiveness that I've bestowed on my parents. Now, in order to be able to reconcile with that, some of us might need to talk about it. Some of us might need to be able to go to counseling. Some of us might need coaching. Each person varies. Some of us are able to move on in our lives and coast through life without even realizing that our behavior has had an impact on those around us because they haven't expressed it to us. So I know, authoritarian parents who have such a hold on their children, the way they parent. They say, well, no, my children never speak back to me. They have a lot of respect for me. But actually, they are so afraid, they don't know how to respond because they're not sure how that volcano will erupt, or what the consequences of that will be. So again, these quotes that I just read out to you, they also signify that these feelings and outlook on life and how we experience things are based on the basis of the relationships that we have as we grow up. So does that mean that it's too late for some of us on this group? If some of this resonates with me, is it too late for me to heal? Is it too late for me to look back and say, you know, I was smacked, or I was this, and I was neglected, I was abused. How do I deal with it now? But at the same time, if we are teachers, and I believe whether we're a classroom teacher or a parent or a member of the community, we are all educators. We all have the role of being educators. So whether we're in the classroom with a formal qualification of being a teacher, or whether I'm an adult or a young person in the community, I am still a person who is involved in educating myself and those around me. Whether that's a good education or problematic is in how I do it, based on the experiences that I've had. So when we look at our role as educators, we have two options here. So in a way, we create the narrative. We create the mindset of our children, our families, of our own mindset in how we see health, whether it's illness or whether it's resilience. So as I said, as we've discussed together, that mental health normally signifies, ill health signifies vulnerability, and good health somehow signifies resilience. But actually, could vulnerability, without acknowledging the sense of vulnerability that we have, can I reach the resilience? Can I put a cover on this, you know, box this up, this head that we have on the left, box it up in such a way that we have a beautiful packaging of resilience on the outside, but as soon as a calamity hits us, as soon as a difficult, complex situation hits us, we spiral so quickly into this head of labels that we have here, that we really find it much more difficult to go back into resilience. So the true resilience actually is being able to acknowledge and be aware of some of the symptoms, and knowing and having the tools to deal with it. So that, again, if I go back to the example I gave at the beginning, this young lady was saying that, you know, I was really smacked when I was little. That's because I was naughty. And out of all my 11 siblings, I was smacked the most. But, you know, I deserved it because I was really, really naughty. But, you know, that made me feel more confident. I'm able to speak up. I'm able to do this. But sadly, what I'm seeing in my marriage, she said, is that I've turned into my mom. And I never wanted to be my mom in that respect, because in the relationship that my mom and dad had, he was very much the dictating part, and she very much was the person who obeyed and who just got on with things. And she said, I've just realized in my marriage, this is what I am. I'm not able to stand up to my husband. I'm not able to express what I feel to him. And that is repeating the cycle that my mom and my dad has, that relationship. And she said, you know, it's because I don't know how to. I've only had my mom as a role model, so I don't have the tools to know how to speak up so that I can be heard and I can express what I feel. So again, it's relationships that we have as we are growing up that often dictates how we see ourselves in different contexts. So I love this hadith where Prophet says that whoever knows himself knows his Lord. And this is where I want to focus a bit more on what faith has to say about our emotional resilience and emotional intelligence. Because when you look at relationships, actually it's steeped in emotions, right? And so when I asked this young lady, so what is it that you want out of this coaching? She said, I want to be strong. I said, you know, this is going to be an emotional journey. She said, no, I don't want it to be an emotional journey. I want it to be objective. I want it to be things that I can do so that I am not emotional. And that really struck me, because we are emotional beings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us emotional beings. How is it that in the Western world that we are raising children to negate, to sideline their emotions in order to demonstrate a sense of intelligence and resilience? So actually, when you look at emotional intelligence, any sort of intelligence, IQ to spiritual intelligence, to emotional intelligence, to social intelligence, it involves these, what you see in these blue circles. So it involves a certain amount of self-awareness. It involves self-regulations. How do I regulate my emotions? What is my experience of what I've seen in my family? How do people regulate emotions? Do I go cold? Do I do the cold shoulder treatment? Do I rant and rave? Do I shout? Do I put the other person down so I look a bit better? What sort of motivation do I have? What sort of goal do I have in life? What motivates me to get up in the morning? What motivates me to carry on even though I've had a bad day yesterday? The sense of empathy, can I put myself in somebody else's shoes to be able to understand how they feel? Now, if you think about children and young people, many young people lack this to a certain degree because they have been brought up with a sense of entitlement. Yeah, so they have this sense of entitlement that I should be the center of attention. What I say, I will have. So they're not able to differentiate between what is it that I need over what is it that I want. Yeah, so the wants tend to take over the sense of need, and we as parents feel sometimes stuck, or teachers are a bit better in the classroom, but when we return home as a parent, there's a guilt that we carry. I've been away from my child. Can I compensate that with a gift? Can I compensate with the ice cream? I know they shouldn't have it, but I'll give it to them because I've been away, I've been working, I've been distanced from my child. So we try to overcompensate in a way that creates this sense of entitlement in our children, which really has an impact on the level of empathy that our children have, which impacts on the social skills that they have, how they relate to other children, other individuals. I remember I had a young man, about 13, 14, when I did a home visit. He wanted the latest trainers, he wanted the latest jacket. And when I said to him, look, your dad is a cab driver. How do you expect him to manage on his salary to give you what you want? So why doesn't he just go and get the second job? Or why doesn't he do longer hours? So that sense of empathy and that social awareness, even amongst the family, is really lacking in our children. So with moving on, actually, within Islam, subhanAllah, we have a really good sense of who we are and where we should be. Where are we actually struggling? So many of you are aware of this, the paradigms of the self. So you have the different levels of the soul. So we have the nafs struggling at different levels. So we have al-ammara, which is the soul inclining to evil. We have the blaming self, and we have the tranquil self. So these are different levels, and majority of us will say that, I'm not one that really inclines to evil. I'm struggling between the blaming self and the tranquil soul. Yeah, so the guilt that we carry to the contentment that we're seeking. Now, how do we do this if we want good mental health? How do we put this into reality in our lives so that we are able to acknowledge the state that we're in? How many of us feel comfortable saying that, I'm really struggling with my nafs, desiring things that I really don't want, but I don't know how to deal with it? Or are we all trying to show an exterior of, I'm a content self, I've got this lovely house, this lovely car, and my children are doing really well. Alhamdulillah, they're doing well in their exams. And so there's an exterior that looks really good, but actually at home, people aren't happy. There's good adults in the house, but they're all leading their individual lives. So one of the characteristics I see in practicing families, and I put that in quotes, there's how people understand practicing. But in general, when you see a family that is trying to be on the path of deen, sometimes what I see in families is that you have these wonderful individuals that are growing up, but they're all leading individual lives. There's not much connection between them. The siblings are not really connected to each other. The parents are not really connected to the children in the same way. We're able to remind them to pray, fast, and they're doing great. They're head of ISOCs here, and they're doing things. They're doing really well. But actually, in the home, that sense of togetherness, the sense of family, the sense of contentment isn't there. So we've raised individual great children, but actually socially, they don't have the skills to come together. So this again is based on an idea that we treat contentment in an individual way. So I will buy the same sort of PSP for each child. I will buy a whisper bar for each child. And I remember a friend sharing that with me, that, you know, when my dad used to buy a Snickers bar, he used to come home and cut it in 4, and that we each used to have a little piece of it. And yes, we didn't like it, or we didn't. We thought, you know, why is he being so stingy? But actually, over time, it taught us how to share. It taught us how to give. Whereas now, the fear of not wanting to see our children squabble, we give them all individual things to have. So this sense of, again, entitlement and the need is being filled in a different way, and we overcompensate for our guilt and the shortcomings that we have. Now, again, if you look at the Quran, subhanAllah, it's such a beautiful, and as we are all connected to it, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really highlights his vulnerability. And with each verse you see here, he has a solution to it, that if you find nobody else, I am here that you can turn to me, right? With that raw vulnerability that we have, that thing, that the gooey inside that we can't share with anybody else, we have Allah to turn to. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is already saying to us, I recognize you are weak because I created you weak. So with our children, even in our classrooms, we need to really celebrate when they feel they can't achieve something. I have so many parents saying to me, you know, my child is a perfectionist. They really struggle when they can't get something right, so they'll rip it up and they'll throw it away. Where are they getting this sense of perfection from? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not asking us to be perfect. He is recognizing that we are weak, and that he has that embrace ready for us when we are down, right? So again, as educators, we need to embrace that child who is struggling, who's putting the effort in. Even ourselves, give yourself the permission to be embraced by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you are feeling down. So in Surah Yunus, again, you have when affliction touches man, he calls upon us, and in different situations. But actually, when we are relieved of that burden, you know, we transgress and we're not grateful. Yeah. And the third verse here, it says, when adversity touches man, he calls upon us. When we bestow on him favor from us, he says, I have only been given it because of my knowledge. So we somehow take it back to us. And I just wanted to share a very short, small anecdote from a session I was doing with university students yesterday. And I was saying to them, you know, sometimes I really find it difficult to really open myself up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there's a part of me that still feels I'm in control of certain parts of my life. I still think tomorrow I have a plan that I can actually execute because it's within my control. So what I do open up to him is not really genuine as such, because then I'm, you know, there's a power struggle between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we actually open up ourselves to our Lord, it is actually saying, even what I have planned, it is in your hands, because I have no ownership over it. So could you enable me to do this? So in a similar way, when our children at home and in school, in classroom, look up to us, they are beseeching a similar thing from us as well. That, you know, if I was to open up to you, will you protect it? Will you be with me as I journey through this phase? Or will you remind me at a later stage that that was a weakness that I had? So again, the role that we play is very, very crucial with the young people in our lives that we have a circle, you know, influence over, that we need to have this trust built between us, that we will be there to support them. If we can't, we will find a way that we can make it easier for them, inshallah. So with that, you know, in mind, I just want you, you know, as you are probably all very aware, that healing is not linear. It will have ups and downs, and we should be there to catch people when they're in their troughs, not just celebrate when they're at their peaks. So really, each has a story, and your troughs could be the source of your peak, but may not be the source of your peak. So if they're not the source of your peak, have you bottled it up? So I just wanted to use this example, that how we see peaks and troughs in our lives, that sometimes we generate a life where we coast on these peaks, and we're not really in tune with the trust because it's so hard to think about. It's painful. And there's nobody really there to support us through this. So again, teachers, parents, I reach out to you to be able to be that person, and that will be healing in yourself as well. As you see your children grow, you will grow through it, inshallah. And the last is the mindset I was talking about at the beginning. What is this mindset? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I am as my servant thinks I am. I am with him when he makes mention of me. If he makes mention of me to himself, I make mention of him to myself. And if he makes mention of me in an assembly, I make mention of him in an assembly better than it. And if he draws near to me an arm's length, I draw near to him a cubit. And if he draws near to me a cubit, I draw near to him a fathom. And if he comes to me walking, I go to him at speed. And subhanAllah, this is the kind of support Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has for us in place. Now, I would just love for you to think about as teachers and as educators and as parents, what structure do we have in place at home and in our schools where we can support our children through these different stages? We are very good at mentioning our children in assemblies, right? This is the assembly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about at the greater level, in a special occasion. But actually, when they make a mistake, do we see that as a strength and tell the world in an assembly of how they've managed to overcome it, how resilient they were, how wonderful they were at overcoming that shortcoming or the hurdle they had to overcome to be able to reach this wonderful success? So again, it's really in what's not being said that we sometimes need to focus on and really ask, in mental health, you may have come across this, you can ask somebody how they are, brother Babar, how are you? And he might say, yeah, I'm fine, alhamdulillah, everything's fine. But the second time you ask, are you actually okay? How are you? That has a different tone. So again, it's the concern. So to really draw away from the superficial level of relationships that we have in society and actually go a layer deeper where we can show concern, where we can show a connection is so, so important. So again, relationships are the bedrock of resilience and vulnerability. And each of your children, and in education, we call it funds of knowledge. Each of your children, each one of us brings a story to the table. And it's so important with our journeys with each other and our children, we find out what those stories are. Am I trying to shape my child's story, or can they have an opportunity to shape their own story? So again, these stories are so powerful, and the Quran is full of stories to help us to reflect and to ponder and to know ourselves better and to learn lessons from people of the past as we move forward with our lives, inshallah. So just wanted to leave it at that. I hope I've been able to do some justice to the topic in such a short amount of time. So subhanak Allahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. Absolutely fantastic presentation, Dr. Mahera. MashaAllah, thank you so much. It's always, whenever I sit in on any of your workshops or presentations, I just get bombarded with so many thoughts and ideas in my head. So my head's buzzing at the moment, and I'm sure
That's a good sign.
all the nearly 100 people in the room, their heads are buzzing as well. So, Jazakallah khair. Now, I know we haven't got a huge amount of time for Q&A, but we do have some who want to ask a question. Let's your slide.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
If I can ask you just to disable your slides.
Oh, sure.
And then what we can do, I can then select. I know there was Sister Nasreen who had her hand up. Let me just.
Is it okay? Can you still see?
Yeah, no, I think we can. If you go to just disable slide or no longer share, there's an option. We can still see your slides.
Not sure how to do that. Sorry. Let me just.
I think I can do it. I think I can do it. There you go. There you go. I can do it.
Perfect. Thank you.
There you go. I've done it. Okay. Right. Right. Now, as I said at the beginning, if you want to ask a question, you can put your hand up, or you can write the word "speak" in the chat box. Only I can see the box, so you don't need to worry about anyone else sort of seeing it. So we had Sister Nasreen who had her hand up earlier on. I can't see the hand up anymore. Okay, in which case we will go to Abu Hafs, inshallah, if I can just get to Abu Hafs. Where are you? Abu Hafs, Abu Hafs. Just a minute. I can find Abu Hafs.
While you do that, I think there's a private message that's been sent to me. It says, Jazakallah, I feel we need more or at least a follow-up session. Okay, so please share links to your other publications. Okay.
Right, okay. Right, this is quite a difficult thing to do. Finding. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's get one person. We've got Haji Akram Khan Chima, who has written quite a lengthy comment, but I want him to say the comment in person. So I've unmuted you, Haji Akram, who is normally in the UK, but is stuck out there in Pakistan because of the lockdown. You've mentioned a lovely comment in the chat box, but if I can ask you to say that comment in person, if that's okay, Haji Akram. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, we're not doing too well with the question. Okay, I'll read it out. He says, but we need to practice honest self-evaluation, as in the hadith, as yourself, how you used today. How can I do better tomorrow? Teach us to practice self-evaluation, etc. And then there was also another point that Ustad Idris mentioned as well, was talking about how let me come to that. Just go down a bit. How sometimes psychological scars, there you go, psychological damage is worse than physical.
Yeah.
How much would you agree with that?
Yes, I think so, because you can easily put a plaster on a physical because you see it. And it's sort of a thing that's promoted a lot in mental health awareness, that actually it's the emotional abuse you don't know. Sometimes you say, oh, alhamdulillah, I have a really quiet child and they're so compliant. They listen to me. I say, you should always watch the quiet ones, because you don't know what's brewing inside. So again, quietness and outbursts are all a symptom of how we deal with pain and fear. So both are as important to note. So yeah, so the internal.
So thank you so much. Wow, I've just been given a tip. I've learned something today. Thank you, Sister Aisha, for giving me the tip of how to find participants. So I've managed to find Abu Hafs. You've just got to type their name in the search box. Fantastic. Okay, so Abu Hafs, over to you. I've unmuted you. What is your question?
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Mahera. First of all, Jazakallah khair for the talk. It was very inspirational. I had a question regarding the students now here. When you work with, I'm talking here specifically the Muslim students, when it comes to time for salah or making dua or dhikr, things like these, sometimes you find that these children are very disengaged. They don't want to take part. For example, they're not bothered about salah. They're not bothered about making dua. For example, if the imam is reciting a dua, they won't want to follow it. And what came to my mind was the verse from Quran where Allah says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا, that the one who turns away from my remembrance, then I will lead them on a depressed life. The advice I wanted from you was, how would we approach children who are showing these signs? Like, do we approach their parents? Do we speak to them? Because they may be quite young. They may only be 9, 10, 11 years old. But if we see things like they don't like to do the salah, they don't like to make a dhikr, they don't like to make dua, etc., how do you think we should go about that?
So I have a personal motto, and I wish I knew that when I was raising my children in their younger years. It's that you have to have a connection before you can correct a child. There has to be a relationship with a child where they have trust in you to be able to give them a nasiha that they will give credence to, that they will respect. So, you know, subhanAllah, you see that at that age, and then when I see students at university, and I have whether they're Muslim or not Muslim, but particularly the halaqah that I've been running with the Muslim students, subhanAllah, they're at the best university, they're at the best, they're doing the most amazing subjects of every parent's dream, that their child will be at the best university doing the most fantastic subjects. But when I do these halaqahs, we always tend to end on emotional well-being, because they will say that they don't feel they are worthy at home. They don't feel that they're good enough at home, right? They feel that as soon as they've reached one milestone, their parents go on to the next one. the bar is constantly moving without an appreciation for the one that they've reached. So one of the encouragement that I would give you is that, with that verse, there are many other verses that talks about identifying the positive first. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has this unconditional love for us before he goes in to correct us. Yeah, he talks about Jannah before he talks about Jahannam. So again, even if he does about Jahannam, there's a context to that. So with children like that, what I would suggest is that you're not going to change their behavior overnight. Somehow you're not going to say something to them that will strike their heart so much that the next day, or it might happen, but generally it doesn't, that the next day they will be so God conscious and they will really listen to what you're saying. So being able to ignore that behavior and focusing on the positives of that child, mashallah, you're so keen, you're so intelligent, you're able to understand things. Teach them the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how grateful we should be. So, in our classrooms, I encourage, especially in Islamic schools, we should start with a morning of gratitude, a gratitude circle. Each child should have a chance and an opportunity to say what they're grateful for that day. How can they start that day? So we have this carpet time, we have story time, and maybe if you start at the beginning or end the day at some stage, being able to do that gratitude circle will be of so much benefit to that child. But also, how do we approach Salah? And I remember one of the mums saying that, I used to pray as a desperation because I'm going to miss it. It's a last minute thing. I'm going to be sinful. And that aura was created around Salah. Whereas when I changed my attitude to, after I pray, I come out to my children and say, subhanAllah, I needed that. I needed that Salah. I'm not doing it for Allah. I'm doing it for me. And that really shifted the relationship the children had with their Salah and how they connected to Allah. So again, we can create that in our classroom. So when we do something, how do we show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is it just superficial, or is there feeling and meaning in it? So when I say feeling and meaning in it, when you congratulate a child, have a physical touch, so touch their shoulder, or some sort of eye contact that is meaningful and that is appropriate, so that they know that you're connecting with them. So that connection is so important before you can correct a child. I hope that helps.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Let's move on to, I hope I pronounced her name correctly, Nireen Malik. I'm going to unmute you now. If I can. Maybe I can't. Doesn't look as though I can. Okay, in which case we will go to. There's lots of questions actually, so we're not short of questions actually. So I'll come back to.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Oh yes, brilliant. Okay, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I just realised I had to unmute myself as well. Sorry.
All right. Go
Okay.
ahead. What's your question?
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah. So my question is, basically, I've come across friends, and from personal experience as well, that over the years, where people have been stuck in certain situations where they haven't been able to change their own situation or change the people around them, what they've learned to do is to literally block out certain things that are happening. So is that an okay thing to do? Because basically what they're doing is they're moving through their life now, and where they come across things that they're not happy with or things they can't change, they're just blocking it out so that they're able to function and continue to provide a healthy atmosphere for their own children.
So if I can just base that in my experience of the families that I've come across through my parenting and the coaching, is that you really truly don't block experiences out. They manifest in certain ways. So when you say that, you block or an individual blocks particular experiences, it either, we don't know until we get to see those children at a later stage, the impact of that behavior or that choice that individual has made. So we'll only see the repercussions of it at a later stage in the people that they've had an impact on. In terms of themselves, what I notice is that parents tend to wave towards being very particular about what they expect to see from their children, or they have a harsh tone, or there's sarcasm involved, or it will come out, it will manifest in a particular way that shows that you really haven't blocked anything, to be honest. So you think you have, but it does, the symptoms are seen in the behavior, which you may not realize, but other people might realize, but they don't know how to tell you. And even if they do, you might become very defensive. So again, it's a really difficult position to be in unless that person acknowledges themselves, like I showed the peaks and troughs, that actually my peak hasn't been as a consequence of dealing with my trough, that experience, that knot that I have, and it was based on something else. So over time, if there's so many of these knots left, it's bound to have an impact on our behavior in some shape or form.
Good, thank you. Can I go to Sheikh Jahangir, please? Sheikh Jahangir, if you,
yes,
yeah, over
yes,
to you.
Here I am.
Yep, we can hear you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Alaikum salam.
Well, Jazakallah, sister. This was a lovely, lovely program. I'm so happy to be here. And there's so much I could relate to in my understanding myself as a parent. There's a few things I quickly like to go through. I've already asked for any links to your publication that you may be willing to share. That's one. The second thing is that I came across a book. It's called The Book You Wish Your Parents Had Read, and Your Children Will Be Glad That You Did. I think the way you're nodding, you probably read it before. You've seen the book. Now, would there be something like that in the Islamic or the Muslim context? Because a lot of the ideology is different from ours. So it would be a lot of help to people that if you could do something like that. That's the second point. And the third thing is that if I would request you to, if you could have some of these webinars or record some videos, because apparently we'll be stuck in lockdown for a while. And anyway, besides being stuck in lockdown, we'll also be able to, mashallah, share and learn so much, because every single slide that you talked about today would require a webinar in itself.
Yes.
Right? So
Yes.
I really felt that thing missing. So Jazakallah once again, and there are 3 points, and I hope I get some more publications from you and see your videos soon, inshallah.
Inshallah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Thank you for that. I have I will pass on some links to Brother Babar, which he can send out with the follow-up email. I believe everybody gets a follow-up email after the session, inshallah. I have a question from privately from somebody, and I don't want to mention their name. So why do teenagers lie continuously, lie to a parent they were close to, lie about absolutely everything, and be secretive? And that is a session on its own, I guess. But the short answer to that is some of it is teenage behavior and how we react to it. So when how do we react to mistakes that our children make? How do we convey our expectations to our children? Am I living through my child? Whose story? Sometimes I ask parents, who are you parenting for? Are you parenting to raise children, or are you parenting to be recognized as the parent? So sometimes if you think about a time of conflict with your teenager, we're so on the defense with our teenager because we want them to recognize what a wonderful parent we are, how hard we're working, how much I've sacrificed for you as a child. Why do you not recognize what I've done? All I'm asking you to do is just get up from your video game and put the washing out. Yeah, so to us every second is a year, but in their head every second is a second. So the expectation that we have, again, somebody, the person here is mentioning that when they're being close to a parent, what is that closeness? What does that closeness look like? Is it closeness that they've always been listening to me and they've been a good child, and now it's time to listen to them? I find it difficult because I don't approve of the friends that they have. They're not working as hard as they should. They're damn lazy. So how are we seeing this teenager is so important for us to reflect on. And really, one thing I say in terms of being a parent and being a teacher actually is our children don't wake up in the morning and think, I'm going to make that person's life hell today. I don't think any child consciously does that. So have that husna, then that good opinion of that child, and set your day off that this is going to be a successful day. Yes, we've had a bad day. We've had an argument yesterday and whatever has happened, but today's a new day, a new opportunity to build a relationship. The other thing I would really alert you to is really reflect on the relationship that we have with our parents. It's a real telling sign of what our relationship will be like with our children, or is like with our children. Often you'll see mirrors. So, I had a parent today, she said that, my children, I don't understand their relationship with food, and I don't understand why they keep wanting money. And after a lot of discussion, she said, that's how we show love in our family. It was through money and my mum cooking all the wonderful food, and we used to fight over it. And suddenly the penny dropped to her that, subhanAllah, in my home, it's exactly the same. And so again, it's really, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us, you know, don't say oof to your parents. Be conscious of the relationship you have with your parents, with elders in your community. If your parents are nearby, the elders in the community. And that way the children will learn that empathy, that vulnerability that we have, that giving, the nurturing that we want to develop in our children, and involve them in charitable work. Really be involved. That way they will know about the community, about the world around them, so that the sense of empathy will develop. We can't raise our children in isolation. It takes a village to raise a child, and it is possible to do so in a city. We have to be active in creating that city village, if that makes sense. City villa, you know, whatever the term may be.
Great, thank you. Let's go to our final question, and then let's call it a day, inshallah. We've got Haji Idris all the way from South Africa. If I can unmute you, or if you're unmute, there you go. Over to you.
Assalamu alaikum. So good to behold you, Dr. Ruby. Everything you said resonates with me. And one of my my pet hobbies is to talk about a particular theme. In the end, the bottom line is about our relationship with our kids at our school. Do they trust you? Do they love you? Kids are always evaluating us. And one of the big challenges is this, and I often say that great teachers are a gift from Allah. Do you think teachers themselves can be taught how to love, how to connect with children? Do you think that's possible, or do you think it's something intrinsic, something that Allah has given them as a gift? Because when children love you, they'll do anything for you.
That's a really, Jazakallah khair, and it's a privilege to be in your company, subhanAllah. So that's a really, really important question. Is it nature versus nurture? And again, it's with children as well. But I think everybody who comes into teaching, something has driven them to come into teaching. A yearning to see change, or to fill a gap that hasn't been filled in their life, and they want to give it back to the children that's in their care. So I think there's a, you know, as long as a string, there's reasons why we go into teaching. But I don't think it's possible to go into teaching if you don't have an ounce of nurturing, you know, nature in you. So I think, yes, you have that, but I think it can be nurtured. The quality of connecting, it's our fitra. I really believe it's actually reconnecting us to our fitra again, and knowing how to do that will enable us to become that nurturing self, inshallah. So again, it's connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which aspires and wants always to do the good. So I think teachers have that mindset already, is to nurture how to do that.
All right. Shukran, thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. That's Dr. Mahera Ruby. I've added the link to your website in the chat box, and I know that there are many workshops and webinars that you conduct, and if any of the audience members are interested, then you can please log onto her website. I know that there are regular webinars and courses taking place, and I know this 1 hour is pretty much a snapshot, and I know that you can talk for hours and hours about each aspect of what we've talked about. So this is very much a flavor. So if you've liked what you've heard, then please do visit her website, inshallah, and then you can join any of the courses and webinars that she is currently running, inshallah. Thank you so much, Dr. Mahera. It's a real honor and pleasure. I know that we are taking a great deal away with us, and I think the important thing is that we need to really act upon the information that we have received. There is, I'm sure you'd agree, there's little point in just storing that up in our heads and then not really acting upon it. Yeah. So even if we're able to implement just a few of those out of the many tips and strategies that Dr. Mahera has provided us today, then it would have all been worth it, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Just to let you know that our next webinar, which is next week at the same time, will be on what makes education Islamic. Okay, you might think you know what makes education Islamic, but let's join that webinar with an open mind. And we have the very able Professor Rajab Shenturk, who is the president of the Ibn Khaldun University in Turkey. So, mashallah, he's a very well-known figure in Istanbul in education and academic circles. And we are very honored and privileged to have him booked for us next week, inshallah. So please do tune in. And I know you're looking at the post and thinking, does that mean that we're coming to an end next week? The answer is no, because I've got another series of 6 webinars, inshallah. That poster we will be releasing at some point next week, inshallah. This will go on as long as you want it, inshallah. And I think the idea of learning remotely and from a distance, I think is here to stay for some time. And even if there is some blended learning, some face-to-face and some online, inshallah, we will continue going. Thank you so much, everyone. Jazakumullah khair. We are, of course, in the last couple of days of Ramadan. Let's make the most of it, inshallah. And of course, in a couple of days' time, we have the Yawm al-Eid. So I wish all of you and your families a wonderful Eid, inshallah. And we will see you next week. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.